How are you, my friend? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Chioma. In today's video, I am going straight to the point, yes. So I want to talk about the risk assessments that play a part in how your student visa application is processed. Now, I made a video recently. I think it would be the fourth most recent video I have made so far, where I talked about 5 reasons that might cause your visa application to be rejected. So I spoke about risk assessments. I talked about risk in the sense of the school you're applying to, also in the context of the country you're coming from. And as you can imagine, some of you have become even more curious to know what these risks are. And there's been more and more questions coming through about making a video addressing some of these risk factors. So this video is a response to that request. I hope it helps answer some of your questions. When it comes to processing your student visa application, there are 2 major considerations which would determine the kind of rules that your application might be subject to in terms of processing. So one of them is related to the status of the country you're coming from and also the status of the school you're applying to. And by status, I mean, in relation to risk and in relation to what the department calls evidence levels. In this video, I am going to be mentioning the department a lot. I just want you to know that I am referring to the immigration department. Let me give you a bit of context. Before 2016, which was when the new system came in place, there was an older system, and the language used in that system in terms of student visa processing was very risk oriented. So there were risk assessment levels, and there were 3 levels in that framework. So a country could be assigned a risk level 1 or risk level 2 or risk level 3. Risk level 1 was the lowest level of risk, and risk level 3 was the highest level of risk. In the new system, which is contained within a framework called the SSVF, SSVF stands for Simplified Student Visa Framework, some of the principles from the old system have been carried onto the new system. So even though the understanding is that there is still some kind of risk assessment that happens, the language has changed. It's no longer about risk assessment levels, but rather the department has chosen to call it evidence levels. So what are evidence levels, you might be asking yourself? Evidence level refers to the amount of evidence that will be required from a prospective student visa applicant. For instance, if a student visa applicant is coming from an evidence level 1 country, it just means that they will not be required to demonstrate that they meet certain requirements. In this case, the proof of financial capacity and the English language proficiency requirements by providing documentary evidence. It just means that they would have to prove that they meet these requirements by signing a declaration. It's as simple as that. But if an applicant is coming from an evidence level 3 country, they most likely will be asked to provide documentary evidence for proof of funds and evidence of English language proficiency. Another thing to keep in mind about the evidence levels is that they are represented in numbers. Just as with the old system, there are 3 evidence levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. And these evidence levels are allocated both to countries of citizenship and also the education provider here in Australia that a student visa applicant is interested in coming to. Schools have something called streamlined benefits. And these streamlined benefits just speak to the fact that they are able to waive that requirement for financial capacity and English language proficiency. If we're looking at an evidence level 3 school, they can only pass on the streamlined benefits to applicants coming from level 1 countries. Okay? If it's a level 3 school and there's an applicant coming from an evidence level 3 country, they would most likely be required to cite some evidence around financial capacity and English language proficiency from the student applicant. So in summary, education providers that are allocated the lowest evidence level can pass on streamlined benefits to any applicant regardless of their country. But evidence level 3 schools can only pass on the streamlined benefits to applicants coming from level 1 countries. Okay, so I want you to always think level 1 lowest risk, level 3, highest risk. So another question you might now be asking yourself is, how do you then know where you sit? Do you sit at a level 1, or will you be assessed at a level 3 coming from your country? The department has set out a document checklist tool which anyone can access on their website, and I'm sure some of you might be familiar with this checklist tool. Some of you might even have used it as well. Please check out a link I'm going to leave in the description if you would like to use the document checklist tool. So the document checklist tool asks you for 2 pieces of information: your country of citizenship and also the school that you're coming to study at. The combination of these 2 factors will help that tool to generate the checklist of documents that you will need to provide towards your student visa application. So I have also had comments from people, especially people from Nigeria, who have said to me that when they have used the document checklist tool, they have found that they are not required to provide proof of financial capacity, or in some cases even English language documents. Okay, and that is fine, but I want to draw your attention to a clause I found on the SSVF, which is the Simplified Student Visa Framework, right? I saw this clause that says that, however, the department reserves the right to request further evidence from an applicant where appropriate. And I think it's really important you pay attention to this clause and reflect on the implications of this clause on your visa application. What comes to me when I read that clause is that even though the document checklist might give you the impression that you do not need to provide evidence of financial capacity documents or English language proficiency documents, the visa officer who will be looking at that application and processing your application still reserves the right to ask you to provide these documents. And if we go back to what I said in the previous video I referenced earlier, where I spoke about some of the things that can cause your visa application to be rejected, you would remember that I said that one of the grounds on which your student visa application might be rejected would be submitting an incomplete application. If your visa officer decides that your application is incomplete because you did not submit financial documents or you did not submit English language documents, they have 2 options. They can choose to request for those documents and give you a range of time within which to respond and provide those documents, or some visa officers will not even extend that opportunity for you to provide those documents, and they are well within their rights to actually reject your visa on the grounds of an incomplete application. And that is why I said it is important for you to keep this clause in mind, even when you're using the document checklist tool. So having said all of that regarding evidence levels, another question you might be asking is, where exactly can we see information about the evidence levels that apply to us, as people coming from a certain country, or the evidence level that applies to the school I am interested in going to? All right, before I continue, I just want to encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already done so, and at the very least, give this video a thumbs up. Let's continue. Thank you. In the old system, that was the system before 2016, the department was very open with that information and they put it online. Just about anybody could look it up and see where their country fell in terms of risk assessment level. In the new system, the department has made it quite clear that they are not disclosing that information for certain reasons. The reasons that they gave were that they do not want to create a situation where non-genuine students begin to target evidence level 1 schools, or education agents begin to target only prospective students from certain countries because of their evidence level. And what that also tells me is that you need to be careful when you take the advice of your migration agent or even your education agent. Schools have been discouraged from disclosing that information even to their own education agents. So it is important that you know exactly what this means for you. In some cases, it might mean that even your education agent is unable to tell you exactly what you would need for your visa application to be successful. They can stand, as a representative of the school and help you scale through the process of obtaining enrollment or obtaining admission into a school, but that's where it ends. When it comes to the visa processing, unfortunately, there are little blind spots that even your education agent or your migration agent might not be able to clarify for you, so you need to be careful. So even though the information about the evidence levels of different countries and different schools is not publicly available for you to view or for you to consider, there's something else that I think might be helpful for you to know as well. Okay, so let's talk about how these evidence levels are actually calculated. What are some of the factors, or should I call them the risk factors, that go into making the decision that determines the evidence level of a particular school? So there's a weighted average that the department uses, and this weighted average is made up of different components, and those components, you might want to see them as the risk indicators, and each of those indicators take up a percentage of the average. Let's talk about them. The first one would be the rate of visa cancellations. So this represents the number of people from a particular school who hold a valid confirmation of enrollment from that school, but whose visas have been cancelled for several reasons. So it might be reasons related to a breach of enrollment or visa conditions, for instance, not attending class, not meeting class attendance requirements, working above 20 hours a week or 40 hours a fortnight. Again, I want you to remember that the restrictions around work hours have been suspended for now. It's a temporary suspension, but nobody knows when that suspension is going to be lifted. But I am just giving you instances where a visa might be cancelled. And for this particular indicator, it takes up 25% of the average. We go on to the next one, which is rate of refusals, which are fraud related, and this one takes up 40%. That's a huge chunk. 40% of the average. So fraud related visa refusals, I want to believe you already know what that would be about. So people who are submitting fraudulent documents with their applications, and that sort of thing. And then rate of refusals for non-fraud related reasons takes up 10% of the average. Student visa holders becoming unlawful non-citizens, so people who overstay their visa and remain in the country unlawfully for more than 28 days, okay, and that takes up 15% of the average. And the last one is rates of subsequent protection visa applications. So this would be people who come in first on a student visa and then shortly after that apply for one of the protection visas that Australia has. It could be an asylum visa or a refugee visa or something like that. So people within this group take up 10% of the average. When the department is done with their calculations, considering all these different indicators of risk, if a school sits below 1 point, then they are considered to be at evidence level 1. If after the calculation a school's score is falling anywhere between 1 and 2.7 marks or 1 and 2.7 points, then they sit at evidence level 2. If it is above 2.7 points, then that school will be considered an evidence level 3 school. I hope this has been helpful. I will end this video here and I will see you again soon. But please, before you go, don't forget to like this video at the very least, and subscribe if you have enjoyed the video or if you have thought it was helpful. Please subscribe and support this channel, and you're free to share my videos, okay? I'll see you again in my next video. Bye bye.